I'd like to call the meeting of the Maple Run Unified School District Board of Directors for November 2nd, 2022 to order at 6 p.m. You folks are at the central office on Catherine Street, and a few of us are joining via remote link with Zoom. First item on the agenda is the agenda review. It's my understanding that we have no items to make any modifications on. Does anyone have any comments related to that? Hearing none, I'm going to approve the agenda as is currently in your packet. Next item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. Please rise and join me for a Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you for that. Next item on the agenda is the visitor section. The visitor section is an area for public comment of the meeting, and it is an opportunity for community members to address issues of concern about policy, budget, or administrative matters, or to share ideas about how we can work together to improve our schools. We value input and respect divergent views. We ask you to limit your remarks to time consistent as prescribed by the chair, which I do 2 minutes per topic, and refrain from airing grievances with individual members of the school community, including respecting the privacy of students and parents. Those attending remotely may type their full name in the comment section if they wish to speak. During these meetings, the comment section is usually disabled. Thank you. Do we have any folks in the room that would like to speak?
We have 2, 3, 4.
Okay. So what I would like to ask you to do is to step up to the microphone, state your name and the community you're from, and then state your piece. Whoever would like to go first.
I'll go ahead.
Warm us up.
I'll warm you guys up.
There you go.
I'm not a performer, so just.
No, I think
How do you do this?
see.
Oh, there we go. All right, that makes work. I'm pretty loud. So, thank you for letting me speak tonight. My name is Chris Castor. I'm a parent of 2 students that attend town school in St. Albans, 7th and 8th grade. I live here in the community, obviously. First, I want to thank you for all of your participation on the board. I serve on a couple boards myself, and I know it's not easy with all the different varying opinions that are out there. So thank you for stepping up to the plate, first and foremost. The reason I'm here tonight, I'd like to revisit the issue of the SRO. I know that it's been discussed several times, and I had the opportunity to review the SRO committee video that Amanda shared with me probably a week or so ago. And I gotta be honest, I don't think it was representative of the community, through no fault of your own. But I have talked to several people, and I think the vast majority of people in this community would like to see that revisited. I'll be honest with you, I spent too many mornings watching the Today Show or various news programs after a school shooting, and I always got a sense of security dropping my kids off to see a police officer there that was trained to potentially repel something awful from happening. And I think by removing him or her out of the school district was wrong. I think that the reasoning behind it, from what I heard, was kind of fear-mongering, if you will. And I just don't think that that decision represents what the community wants. And I'd really like it put on a ballot if that was possible. So, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Next speaker.
Hi, my name is Amanda Giroux. I live in St. Albans Town, and I have a child that goes to SATEC in St. Albans. Again, as Chris said, I would like to see the SRO program revisited and put on the ballot for the taxpayers and the voters of the community. I've heard from people at the school, staff, other parents. They don't know why the SROs even were out of school. They have no knowledge, really, that they were even out of school, half of them. And from the ones that I did speak to, the staff in the schools said that they have nothing but positive things to say about it, and that they would actually like them back in school. And exactly what Chris said, the news just last week, the online potential threat, we didn't know about that till our children were in school. We had no choice. We didn't know. We had to send them. If I would have known before I sent my child to school, I probably wouldn't have sent them that day, because let's face it, it gives me anxiety and I worry and I wonder, should I send my kid to school or not? So the SROs, from what I heard from the school, nothing but positive things from the staff who they're protecting. That's it.
Thank you, Amanda. Is there another speaker that would wishes to speak?
Yes, please. Hi, my name's Heather Gutschall. I have a sixth grader in SATEC. I wasn't here for this, but I do back them up on their opinion on that. I'm here today because I went to the Run, Hide, and Fight parent informational session that I felt pretty disappointed about. I thought it was going to be a session that explains what's going on in the classrooms and what is being told to the students in the plans, and it wasn't about that. And I feel disappointed with the communication around this topic, and I'm not sure why parents haven't been involved in the conversation. So Bill advised that I show up today and ask if we could somehow form some kind of collaborative conversation between the leaders of the district and parents. I don't feel like we've quite had the space to be able to express our concerns or what we would like to see when you're literally teaching our kids how to deal with life and death. So I would really appreciate if some conversation could happen of how we can bridge this clear gap of decisions being made about our children and not talking to the parents about it. So I offered to Bill to give my contact information, and I'd be more than happy on the parent side to help bridge this gap, but I think it's very important. When I asked my son what the plan is for his classroom, he told me, and I asked the teacher what she's sharing, because Bill advised that each teacher gets education and then they get to decide what happens in the classroom. She sent me the slideshow, I read it. The first thing says, listen to the adults. I asked my son, what happens if there's not an adult? He didn't know what to do. I think there's a lot of opening to give the same message to students and do some better training, because in reality, an adult might not be in the room, and then what? And so I'm a little concerned about the different messages that are being sent without parent conversation involved. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. Don't be surprised if you're contacted.
I would love to be contacted. I will give my information to anybody who wants it.
All right. Erin, can you collect her information so we have it for the future, please?
Yes, okay.
And anyone else in the room that wants to share, actually. Any folks remote that wish to speak
Nelda,
regarding this topic or other topic? Yes?
Nelda, I think we still have someone else in the audience that
Oh,
wants to
my
speak.
apologies. Okay, please speak. Didn't mean to exclude you, just can't see everyone from my vantage point.
Hi, I'm Melissa Graves. I have 3 students in Fairfield Center School. I have come tonight to address the board. I have had, I'll say, an array of issues that have come through, and I have spoken with Mr. Kimball about them, and have been railroaded and pushed off to the point of when I came into executive session, they only would address 2 specific questions in regard to my complaint instead of the entire complaint. And I'm having issues in terms of policies not being followed by staff at Fairfield Center School, specifically the principal. And I'm asking the board to take the time to actually listen to my complaint. And it's not about certain personnel, it's about a systematic problem that is occurring within the school. And I want the time to speak with people, and because it's regarding a student and specific personnel, I know that they would prefer it's an executive session. That can happen again, that is fine. But I would like the board to actually sit down and listen to me and listen to my complaint and the wholehearted complaint and all of the details that are involved. And stop railroading and pushing it into a different scenario that doesn't exist, or addressing a question that is not the problem.
Okay, Alyssa, thank you. We can do some follow-up on that, and I can speak to the superintendent, and we'll make sure someone gets back to you, okay? To do some additional follow-up. Any other folks in the room that would wish to speak on any of the issues that we've discussed, or any new issue? Okay, I'm hearing none. Any folks online that wish to address the board?
No, excuse me, no one online.
Did you say no one online?
Yes, John's got, he's a little ways from the mic, so yes, no one online.
Okay, so I think we've addressed all the persons that wish to address the board. Hearing no others, I'm going to move on in the agenda. Those of you that are here, you're welcome to stay for the meeting or leave whenever you need to, it's your prerogative. Next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. We have 3 items on that, several sets of minutes, media packet, and staff changes. Does anyone wish to pull any of these out independently and discuss them? Hearing none, we're going to accept the consent agenda as presented. Next item is reports to the board. We have 2 reports coming forward. One of them is the student board representatives report. Do we have some here to discuss that?
Yep, Sarah and Leah are here.
Hi.
Thank you. I'm going to turn it over to you guys, and please present your report. Sorry, I'm having trouble seeing you, but I can see you now.
Hi everybody, thanks for having us again. So we are coming to the end of the first quarter. Fall sports are coming to a close. That all really, went well. Soccer, volleyball, football. I think that's cross country. Yep. We did pretty well, I think. Yeah. They had fun. Big thank you to all the students. We're very proud of them for sticking with it through the whole season. Winter sports are also coming up. That's pretty soon. Yeah. The fall musical is also happening. Or the musical. It's the Addams Family, and it's showing the 17th, 18th, and 19th. They're at 7, I believe, and then there's a matinee on the 19th. We had the PSAT last week. Me and Leah both took that. And then we have a fall concert coming up. And there's a dance that student council is putting on. And there's also a strings festival going on today and tomorrow, I believe.
The strings?
Yeah, like the orchestra.
Like district?
Yes.
District.
Well, not district, it's a,
It's under the.
It's like it's like Franklin County Schools.
Yeah.
I want to say. And I was just,
I think
did
there's
you
middle
see the
school and
time?
high
I was gonna
school.
check on my
I don't know the
calendar.
time.
I believe the performance tomorrow night is at 7 o'clock at BFA. I was planning to go, so it's on my calendar.
Perfect. And yep, I'm very glad to be back. I'm so happy to be able to be here after a very long volleyball season. I guess I can give a report kind of what's been going on. I'm not sure if everybody knows about the listening sessions. I'm assuming as much. And we kind of started those last week, and we're looking forward to continuing those within BFA. Right now we're meeting with different clubs to try and get more like student voice in different groups, and I had the opportunity to be in one of the listening sessions with Social Justice Club, which I personally think went very well as to listening to all the students, be able to have the opportunity to kind of feel heard, as the questions were very broad of, you know, what's going well and what may need to be improved, which as a student, you may not get the opportunity to like say those, what you may be thinking, you know, your high school life, I guess. You never really get the opportunity to say that, so I think it's a great opportunity for students to be able to say that in a, you know, a confidential space and feel heard. And I think with the clubs, it's with people that you know, and with the Social Justice Club, it was very supportive conversation. And hopefully I'll be able to be a part of different clubs as I'm in different ones to see, you know, how that differs within the student groups. But I think it went very well. For the listening sessions, me and Sarah, part of our own advisory group here, have been working on the 10,000 gift that Miss Sarah probably told you about a couple weeks ago. We got posters out. We printed posters to put them around BFA that have QR codes to give every student the opportunity to submit a request or a thought or an idea that they may have, so they can get like full student participation if they want to give a suggestion on what we could do to improve student life. That was kind of, it's a very broad question to kind of, but that would, those reports would go back to our group, and we can, you know, we're excited to look at what that is and all the different things that we could possibly do with that money. And lastly, something that's important to me from Social Justice Club is a couple weeks ago we got the opportunity to meet with some representatives from an Essex group on a Vermont chapter, students called Students Demand Action. They met with Social Justice Club in hopes of talking with our group to motivate them to come and talk to the board about gun violence prevention. And the students, at least the Social Justice Club, were excited to have the opportunity to maybe come and speak with the board and talk to everyone about gun safety and what that looks like and how important it is to high school students. And hopefully we can come and give a presentation in hopes of getting a letter sent out to the school district. That is what the Essex High School did, and CVU also did that as well, to give a letter out to the entire district telling the importance of gun safety and firearms and how important it is for high school students. So that to look forward to. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Do any members of the board have any questions for Sarah and Leah?
Leah, were you?
Did I hear a question?
I'm going to ask a question, Melda, because Leah and Sarah and I get to talk, and I know you had a meeting this afternoon, so you might not know, but did you know how soon you wanted, the Social Justice Club wanted to speak to the board?
We have the presentation already.
Yeah, the presentation, right, so maybe the next board meeting.
I don't know.
All right, so Nilda, you and I can maybe talk about that as we're putting together the agenda, and I can let Leah and Sarah and the rest of the students know so they can have plenty of time to be prepped.
That would be great.
Okay.
Thank you again. Next item is item 6B, and it's the Act 173 and Envisioning Plan sort of melted presentation. I believe John and Martha are going to collaborate on this presentation. I don't know who's starting first, but I'll turn it over. Unless you have an intro to give, Bill.
Nope, I'm handing it right over.
Thank you.
So, I will kick us off, and I'm gonna just get the slideshow up if you give me 1 second.
Let's go, we need to go.
All right, Nelda, can you see that on your screen?
I can.
Perfect.
I need to steal one of my scrolls.
Yes.
So there are a few pieces that warrant an update, and they all are related to each other. So Act 173 has a profound impact on all Vermont schools, and thankfully due both the good planning and the alignment of goals when Maple Run did the recovery and envisioning plan for our planning to recover from the pandemic. The areas in Act 173 and the areas in the envisioning plan actually overlap and align. And so that is great because it simplifies things for us as a district, but it also aligns what it is the state is looking for us to be doing and making changes, or the areas they're looking for us to make change in, and the areas that we ourselves have identified to learn and grow in. And so this is a little bit of a combo update on both. And I'll stop at a few different times as I go through in case there are any questions as we're going. The key, sorry, let me get rid of that window up here. So when we think about Act 173, there's a lot that the state has published on it, but the key pieces are really that they're looking to increase the availability and access to high quality services for all students. Whether they're not needing additional support, they need some minor additional support, or they need extensive additional support. And so the changes across the school system run from the way the state is changing, we approach education in every classroom, to the way we deliver and fund special education services. And there are a couple really foundational pieces that are part of the Act itself. And these are the areas that we're very thankful align with the work we've done with the envisioning plan. So that idea of aligned curriculum across the district, developing a needs-based professional development system, which includes professional development in the school day, which actually at the last board meeting, instructional coaching came up as a question that we talked about for a little bit, and that is one of the ways that we fill that need here in Maple Run. Developing comprehensive assessment systems across the district, developing ways to support students outside of academics, and then also developing structures to align the work we're doing across the district and look at data. And I'll talk about those in a little bit more detail. You could also phrase these a little differently and think about them in the way that they impact students. And so there's 5 key components here, or key practices that the state has identified as part of the work. The first one is looking at making sure that the presumption is your core instruction or your first instruction in the classroom works for all kids. Which doesn't sound like a major shift, but it is actually a shift when you think about the other key pieces here. The state is also saying that one of the key changes in practice is that students are not removed from that core instruction to receive additional support. So for many of us, when we went to school, we may remember that if students needed extra help in math or extra help in reading, they were actually often taken out of our math or reading classes to receive that extra help. And the end result of that, research has shown definitively, is that those students fall further and further behind each year because they're not being exposed to grade level instruction. And so the state is codifying that as part of this act, that students must continue to receive instruction at that primary level and then receive supplementary support outside of the regular classroom time. The other big change in practice is that the state is making it much more flexible for schools to assign staff to help students that need additional support. So two of these pieces are actually about that, about specialized instruction and highly qualified staff members. And an example of that that comes up quite often is if a student is on IEP and receiving special education services, the person who might be best suited to deliver that specialized support for them, let's say if they have a difficulty in the area of reading, it might be the reading specialist and not the special education teacher. Previously, that was difficult. It was difficult to reconcile all the competing ways that we support students, and the state has made it very easy by giving us the flexibility to decide who is best equipped to help that student to help them move forward. Now, the other big impact is on how special education is funded, and for this I am happy to introduce Martha.
I'm just going to give a very general overview because special ed funding and all of education funding is very complex, and I'm still figuring out how this Act 173 funding is going to work for us. But basically what they've done is they've removed the reimbursement program the way it was done in the past for special ed funding. What they would do previously was we would say this person qualifies as a special educator, this person's working with these students, this is their cost, we would get reimbursed 60% of that cost, 40% would have to come from the local budget. So it was all based on however much you spend was how much you got in. They've changed it and they've gone to a census-based model where they are working off of an amount per long-term membership. So they're taking a 3-year average of our ADM, average daily membership, and then multiplying that times a rate. And the way they're transitioning us to that rate is they took the reimbursements that our district received over the last 3 years and averaged that out, divided it by the long-term membership to come up with a rate, and they're slowly bringing our rate to match the state's rate. We're within a couple of dollars from the state's rate at this point. So we will get that census block grant, and the only instance where we will actually get a reimbursement for additional costs is if we have students that have high cost needs. And then those are reimbursed at a higher extraordinary reimbursement process. So that way we're not having to pick up the cost 100% for any high needs students. So we have to work within the block grant now. It's not the more you spend, the more revenue you'll get. So we've got to work within the block grant. That's the amount of money we're going to get for special education and or whatever other services we determine we want to use these funds for. So that's kind of the difference between how we were funded before and how we're funded moving forward.
So this is a good point for us just to pause if there are any questions, because these are the key parts of the actual act, but then we can move forward with contextualizing that within what we're doing at Maple Run. But I don't know if there are any questions.
Yes, so my question is, so students are going to remain in the classroom for all their extra help? Or they're going to, so if I need extra help with reading, I'm going to have a reading specialist or someone to come into the classroom and help me during whatever reading time we have, or math. I'd have a specialist come in and help me with math if I was struggling with math.
Actually, it's the reverse of that. So if you, let's say you were struggling with math, you would still get your primary math instruction, maybe with additional support depending on what your needs were, but then you'd also receive supplementary math instruction somewhere else in the schedule that doesn't conflict with that primary time.
Okay, that leads to my second question is, if we're providing supplemental instruction, when would that be done? If kids aren't being taken out of the classroom?
It does create scheduling issues, although I am happy to report there's some version of this happening in our schools already. So most of our schools have a enrichment and intervention block, or some different names, right? But some kind of block like that. where students have an element of choice, and then students that need additional support can receive that support without missing out on the curricular areas. It is with a confined, the way the schedule confines us in terms of start and end times, it is difficult, but my hat is off to the principals that have invested in trying to make this work. It's a lot of effort on their part, and we'll continue to get better at it.
So what about those students that want to do the arts enrichment, or, I don't know, it seems kind of sad to me that we're taking kids out of enrichment or these extracurricular activities. Anyways, it is what it is.
Yeah, so in all of our schools, students do still get access to those even if they need additional support. They might not be able to sign up for a literacy or science elective that they're excited about, or enrichment activity, or they might not get if students have a choice between 3 of those kind of special classes, they might get to choose 2 instead of 3, but nobody has their access to those removed completely.
They have like 3 different is that like on a week by week, or bi-weekly, or monthly?
Right, and that, again, depends on which school and schedule and which point in the year we're talking about, so that gets a little harder to answer definitively.
All right, and then what are high-cost needs?
And
Like what how does that get qualified?
Well, it could be a student that we have to have at a residential placement, or they need specialized equipment, those kinds of things.
It's not necessarily they need PT, OT, and speech therapy in the school system?
No, not necessarily that.
It's a dollar amount, and it's been risen quite a bit from where it was in the
Yeah.
reimbursement.
Yeah.
John, along kind of the same line as Susan, so someone has determined that if a child is not understanding what's going on in that class, it's still better for them to sit in that class than it is for them to be taken out with someone that will help them understand what they're doing. My experience would tell me that if you're sitting there and they're not understanding what's going on, they turn it off. And sometimes that's how you get your discipline problems, is because any of us sitting in class, and if somebody just speaks Spanish, if we don't understand what's going on, our mind drifts. And that's my concern also, is that we're going to have them sit there in a class that they don't understand and expect them to pick something up, understanding that math particularly is building blocks, and the classes up here and they're down here, and they don't have the tools to understand the range, and yet we're determining that this is the best way to do it.
yeah, that's a great question, and thankfully it's an easy one to answer. The research on that is definitive, that students need to maintain exposure to the grade level instruction if they're ever going to catch up. So students that are behind, and the state uses different language than some of the researchers use, but kind of universally we're talking about kids that are 2 years or more behind grade level. In almost all of those cases, what's responsible is a gap in foundational knowledge, right? Mm-hmm. So they're missing something that is a key to be able to continue to advance in the content area. So for most kids, that's a relatively quick remedy in terms of intervention once we figure out what that is, provided we're using good assessment tools. For kids that have a lot of gaps, that requires more intervention time. And so the key for them is and you'll hear me talk about it in a little bit, is designing our classrooms at that core level a little bit differently so that students have access to the class even if they're missing some of the key pieces.
So you're talking teaching to the middle?
No, I'm talking about universal design for learning, which is think about the kids in the class that you have in your class and thinking about the barriers for kids like you're talking about, mm-hmm. and designing your instruction to make it accessible for them. Educators have used a lot of different terms over time, differentiated instruction.
Is that what you're talking about, differentiated instruction?
It's similar in concept, although universal design takes it a little bit of a different approach than the way that differentiated instruction has been explained in the past. And I have some examples of that I can show you.
Thank you.
You said, this approach helps kids, catch up if they're going to, right? Like if they're ever going to catch up, right? Do you have a sense for what percentage of kids actually do catch up under this system, as opposed to the previous system?
No. So there's so many different variables that play into how quickly students make progress. The ones that we control are the quality of the teacher and the match of the service they're receiving to their actual need. And so that's what these systems are all really designed around. But we've talked about it in this room before. There are students that maybe their primary issue that's preventing them from accessing education isn't actually educational or academic in nature. It could be home issues, mental health issues, pieces like that. And so the Backbone 73 encompasses services for all of those. It is a pretty dramatic shift in the way that education is approached across the state. And I will actually say, thankfully, one we're pretty well equipped to handle because of the work that's happened in the district over the past couple of years.
Could you direct me towards some of those, or some of those studies towards me? I'd just like to read those.
Sure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So I'll contextualize this just briefly and give you some snapshots to the envisioning plan. So you may remember this graphic from last year. This was part of the envisioning update. We've got three pillars of that work: the social emotional learning, well-being, mental health and well-being, our academic area, engagement and attendance. And I showed you this graphic last year as well, because these are really the core of what we're doing. It's hard to say that we're ever going to fully feel like we're done and we're going to stop improving, right? So we're using an iterative approach to doing this work, which means getting better every year and being really deliberate about stopping to get feedback about how we're doing and how we can, like, where our focus should be. When we think about SEL, mental health and well-being, last year was the year that this group across the district got started. You can see there's key pieces of work that they were engaged with throughout the year, but the bulk of it was focused on defining or articulating our model for the work, and in some cases adopting models that would work, like the CASEL competencies for SEL, and then developing restorative practice training for us as a district. And so I'm happy to say both of those have gone very well. We've had some initial SEL training with a partner organization here within the district that many staff have taken the opportunity to engage in, and again, we'll actually be having their in-service on the 21st of November. And then we also have a large cohort of Maple Run staff that have gone through the restorative practice training, which was led by this team that Alexis Waite leads. If you're not familiar with them, the CASEL website has lots of resources for understanding and exploring the competencies, but these are those 5: self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making. I think as people that are interested in kids' lives, we would all agree these are very important to their success. And so CASEL is great because it is a research-driven framework that comes with lots of tools that districts can avail themselves of. We also have the academic work that was identified, and you may remember we had some teachers and instructional coaches share an update last fall with you on the beginning of this work across the district. The bulk of it was on aligning across the district our curriculum instruction and assessment, and we did that through 3 lenses. One being the high leverage concepts, so those are those guarantees by grade level that if a student isn't mastering those or isn't getting that, that's when we pull out all the stops, right? Those are the essential guarantees of the class that you're in, and it also helps drive interventions like we were talking about earlier. Then aligning the areas of instruction, which are broader and more content focused, so that students receive, when we talk about Maple Run education, we're talking about our students receiving something in common that is aligned and thoughtful. And then making assessment agreements about how we'll measure their progress and give them feedback as they make their way through those areas of instruction. There are some pieces of this work that are identified in the envisioning plan that the curriculum groups have identified as needing additional work or revisiting, and so one once those groups have the chance to do that work this semester 1, I'm looking forward to another update for you. But I did, you probably remember this quote too. There's this theme in the work where we're talking about academics, which is being really focused, right? And the power of being really focused over giving equal time to every piece of information that's in there. You know, Rob Marzano, who the quote is stolen from, he says, teach less, learn more all the time. And he came about that as a researcher because a group he was leading, when they mapped the Common Core standards by grade level and then mapped them to time, so that from what he defines as an average teacher taught them sequentially, it would take 23 years for a student to receive a Common Core education. So he says if you don't focus and decide what's really important, you're leaving it to chance. And these are some of the examples of where the products are now. So you probably remember these in draft form. So you can see the high leverage concepts. This is an example from literacy for grade 1. The high leverage concepts are up at the top. Example of that first one, if you're having trouble reading it, is know and apply grade level phonics and word analysis skills in decoding words. Right? So they're targeted areas like that. Then the areas of instruction are on the left, and you can see they've linked the standards that they're pulling those from. And then on the right, you can see the assessments. And so if you have students in an elementary, you're probably recognizing some of these words that you see up here. Lexia Rapid being our major measure for reading ability. Things like Fontes and Bunnell. We have different mixes of assessments that are either developed or adopted by us, like Brzezinski or high frequency word lists. So that's a lower grades example. Here's an example from science at the high school level. You can see the high leverage concepts have become a little bit more complex. The areas of instruction are still driven by the standards, which are linked in there. And then on the right, you see the assessment agreements. Now, I chose science as an example because literacy and math have very well-defined targeted assessments that we can either look at the research and say they're reliable and valid or they're not. The other content areas don't have that. And so what we do in those areas, like the example with the BFA Science Department, is shifting to a focus on performance tests. And so having students integrate their knowledge and demonstrate it in a way that requires them to apply it in either a new or novel context, or essentially show that they can transfer what they have learned to a new setting or a new context. And then, of course, as students move through the course, there's a commitment to regular feedback on the high leverage concepts. And the last piece, and this brings me full circle to talking about universal design. For learning, we're talking about engagement and attendance. And the main work here is around universal design for learning. And so there's other good work happening here as well, like summer programming and work with family liaisons in terms of addressing attendance issues. But universal design for learning is the big lever that we have as a district to help kids engage across the curriculum. And so there are some points here, and this is stolen from Novak Education, which is a consultant the state of Vermont has recommended. The Vermont Superintendents Association is actually hired to work with school districts on the implementation of universal design for learning. There's additional, if you go on our website, there's lots of information there, but I have some examples I can send you that start with that idea of what might the barrier be, knowing students that are in your classroom, and then what are the different ways you can think about adapting the learning so that they can be successful. Off the top of my head, there's an example that I saw at Town School actually maybe 2 weeks ago. The students were looking at, so upper elementary grade students were looking at a primary text, right? So the teacher felt like they couldn't modify or adapt the text because the purpose was actually to analyze that primary source document from I don't know, I can't remember how long ago it was, maybe 200, 300 years ago. And they had a group of students in their class that reading comprehension, and in particular decoding, was still an issue for. And so they actually, I think, did a pretty incredible job of thinking about what those barriers might be in advance, and then coming up with strategies that would allow the students to access that in the classroom. And then giving the students the choice about how they wanted to navigate that, which is another key piece. And they range from things like, you know, having a supplementary explanation of what's written there to use with it, to using highlighting or tracing tools as the teacher does a read aloud, which is another strategy to help students access material they might be having trouble with, and then also to building in 10 minutes at the end of the class where that teacher knew they could get that group of students and just spend a little bit of face time with them on this topic. And the pretty incredible thing was they were, and I don't, I'm not sure that she had it planned this way, but that 10-minute time was actually about half instruction on decoding and half instruction on what it was they were doing in the class, which is a perfect example of universal design in action. So happy to share more resources on that if you'd like. But that is the end of the envisioning work to date. I'm sure there are questions, or happy to answer questions.
There's a ton of information there.
I've got a question.
Please.
On the slide that has engagement and attendance, are students getting any support around truancy? Because I know, talking to people during COVID and online learning, there was a lot of, or many kids who did not avail themselves of the opportunity to be online. So truancy was like just exaggerated because of the COVID. Are there interventions now going on about truancy?
Yes. So we, and it is developmentally differentiated, so it looks different in the younger grades as it might at BFA. But attendance is a major focus, and I know Bill has talked with the board quite frankly last year about the challenges we had with attendance. And I'm happy to say it seems to be, we're tracking in the other direction now, which is great news. But there are things that the schools are doing that depend on what the student's actual difficulty is. You know, the family engagement specialists that we have in our schools are liaisons, are key pieces of building those relationships with families and helping figure out how to get kids in school. To other things like just making sure that staff are really on top of marking attendance and that it's accurate and the students know that it's being followed up on.
Okay, thanks.
I have a question. So part of the presentation you were talking about, was it DBL, designer-based learning? What is that what it stands for?
Universal design for learning.
Okay, so that sounds to me like it's very specific and the same for people. So you come up with a plan and then you administer it across a population of students, which sounds different to me than differentiated instruction, which is identifying the very specific issues related to a specific student and designing their learning experience to adapt to what they presumably learn best at. So can you help me, first of all, am I stating that correctly? And if I'm not, then back the question. But if I am stating it correctly, can you help me reconcile through that a little bit?
Yeah, I would phrase it a little bit differently, Nilda. So the key piece of universal design for learning that I didn't mention is being really clear on what the goal is, what the students have to be able to do to demonstrate their learning. And then being really flexible about the pathways to get there. So some students, like the example I gave, might need additional support or some accommodations to do an activity that the class is doing. But another example is you might have different students in the class all doing some form of different demonstration of learning, right? And so this is an example I think that we've done really well over the years as a district, with teachers being really flexible about and giving choice when it comes to assessment options and how students demonstrate their learning. So it does allow for the individualization of education, but where it's differentiated instruction, had the teacher kind of designing individually for every person in the room. The universal design for learning approach is about being really clear about the goal and then helping students get there in a way that the students have some ownership over. So it reflects a little bit more of that research that student agents, the importance of student agency and students having control over their learning and how they demonstrate.
Okay, thank you. Board, anyone have any other questions for John? And Martha's still there too.
Yeah, one more question. For the
All right.
Sorry, no, I do have one more question, if that's okay. Okay. With the universal design for learning, I think it's easy to understand how students that need the additional attention, additional help, receive that and still stay with the grade level, and how this can sort of be optimal for them to reach the objective that the teacher provides. Are the students that wouldn't otherwise need the extra help, that are still, experiencing the same curriculum, do they benefit kind of equally from this type of instruction? And so is it sort of everybody benefits, or is there a trade-off?
Yeah, this is the classic example of a rising tide lifts all ships, or all boats. Sorry, not all boats, yeah. Not great with quotes, but so that increase in student ownership and agency is beneficial for all kids. This actually opens up a lot of possibilities for students along the whole continuum, including kids who are pushing the boundaries in the classroom already, and maybe like I remember as a teacher, you touch on something in class, and then the next day you have a kid that got really excited and came back in, and they're like, I read 8 articles online about that, right? So this approach is perfect for students like that because it gives them the flexibility to kind of put their own influence on it. And it also opens things up and allows teachers to say, like, oh, you're ready to go a little bit further with this. Let me get you going in the right direction and partner with you on it. The key piece is that in all of these examples, I'll simplify it, right? The students are doing the heavy lifting, right? And not, the teacher does the heavy lifting in advance of the class, and then they do some really targeted instruction, which is a heavy lift. But the students actually have to carry much more of the load for their learning, which is something that we know is actually really beneficial for all students, that ownership, the feeling, or the knowledge that they're in control. But it is a mind shift in education.
And so there's systems and supports in place that teachers can lean on, I think, for students that need additional help. Are there systems and supports in place for teachers to lean on for students that don't need the additional help to ensure that they're kind of receiving all those benefits as well?
Yes and no, right? So I would say the primary avenue of support for a teacher, whether a student is struggling or has already mastered part of the content and the teacher wants to figure out how to engage that student, would be the teacher's PLC, right? So these learning communities the teachers have where they're engaged in planning and looking at student data together and sharing best practice. Those are the most beneficial structure for helping teachers address whatever needed as they have in their classroom. A secondary structure, and these are pieces that we're building now, are these common MTSS and EST, so these multi-tiered system of supports and education support team structures in our buildings. And again, those are teams that people can go to when they need help addressing student need in their classroom. Now, I also said no, and so that's to say, if you're 4 years behind grade level on reading, we have an interventionist for that. We don't have the same kind of tool on the other lots of avenues for acceleration that, that the district has. Just maybe less defined.
Sounds great. Thank you.
I just want to add something. I'm trying to stay silent, but one of the reasons for this presentation tonight, there's a couple of reasons. But starting tonight and through December, we're going to be giving you things that impact the budget. Hopefully you heard what Martha had one slide, but it was a very important one slide. We don't have models from the Agency of Education about how much the change in special ed funding from the state is going to impact our budget. So I can't tell you it's good or bad. I just want to let you know we don't know, but we know it's going to impact. There was some modeling when the legislation went through 4 or 5 years ago, but that's old modeling, and we've been told we'll see that sometime in December. So all the reports coming to the board from now until January have a budgetary piece in it. We're being very deliberate in that. But there's a lot, most of this work is programmatic, but I just want the board to be aware of that. So I'll be trying to be blatantly obvious with it.
Thanks, Bill. All right, thank you for that presentation. We're going to move on the agenda. We're on item 7A, implicit bias and anti-racism training. I know Bill's going to tell us that the listening sessions are going to end sometime in November, but I'll let you add to that.
Well, between you and Leah, you took most of my thunder. So the last listening session is scheduled for November 14th. And Grant, I was talking with Sue McCormick Monday. I don't remember if it was yesterday or Monday, but it was Monday. And they're going to start theming from all the listening sessions. So probably by the end of November, they'll have something for the goals committee.
Great.
And so we've had, I think you were about to say how many we had. So, I don't have to date, but we had 11 community listening sessions. And I want to kind of add to what Leah said. We have 12 listening sessions among students, and the kids asked me and Erin to facilitate them, so we've been doing that. But they're not just at BFA, she kind of alluded to that. But we're also going to City and Fairfield. We haven't been able to put one together for SATEC yet. Doesn't mean we won't. And then there's probably some groups that the goals committee thought about that we're not able to pull off within that time. We'll be able to add that information. I'm working with, I've got a meeting with Jeff Benet. We'll make sure he gets the last name correct. Benet, yeah. In a week or so, working on the Abenaki group. So we're working on that. It's just going to take a little longer.
And November 14th, which group is that?
That last group on the 14th is the Hope Happens Here and the Athletic Council at BFA. The last one's for community, and they're actually, I think we only have 2 more left. I don't have the schedule in front of me, but the 3rd is the government officials, and the 7th is business partners, which Liz Gamache has been facilitating for us. So.
Thank you. All right, next item under old business is 7B, setting goals. Bill?
I think I was trying to cover both at the same time, so.
Yeah, you did.
No.
All right, moving on. We have an action item related to non-discrimination mascots and school branding policy. So I would need a motion to adopt the non-discrimination mascots and school branding policy that was warned as a first reading at the October 12th, 2022 board meeting, please.
So moved.
Thanks, Al. Is there a second?
Second.
Thanks, Jack. Discussion. This item came before us at the last meeting for first reading. I talked to Bill about it, and when we prepped for this meeting, we haven't heard anything related to any community concerns. And as far as I know, any board concerns about this that haven't already been articulated. Does anyone have anything that they've heard in the community related to this that needs to be brought up here?
The only concern concern I heard was that because the Bob Whites were named after a person, and the Comets were named technically after Doc Comey, is that because they were named after persons, we would have to change them. My understanding based on this is that we wouldn't have to change them. That's really only, I read it in here somewhere. Any person or groups of persons or organization associated with the repression of others, which neither of these two people did.
Right. That's how I read it too. Is that correct? Is that how you interpret it, Bill?
I'm looking for the exact place where that was in there.
3B.
What?
3B.
3B. Yes, at first blush, I hadn't thought about that, but at first blush, I haven't thought about that through those two people. That is those two people.
Right.
Um,
But it sounds like based on this, we wouldn't have to worry about it.
I'm not saying you wouldn't have to worry about it because the policy allows people to bring a complaint to you.
Right.
I can't say that you are, that allows you not to look at the complaint. I actually think
Okay.
you would have to look at the complaint
Right.
and listen to the person and why they're making the complaint.
Yeah.
And then make a ruling on that based on your policy.
But the complaint has to be based on the policy. And if the way the policy is, the way that I would think an intelligent person would look at the policy and read it, obviously you can complain about anything. But I'm looking at the way we would interpret that policy.
And that's your interpretation as, because this is, you as the board are the one responsible for
Right.
making the ruling on this policy, the way I interpret it. It's not mine to interpret, it's yours. And so you take the complaint and then rule on it.
Yeah.
Because it says right in the complaint, an individual may request an opportunity to appear before the board for purposes of presenting a complaint, relevant facts, and further explanations. So I think that's the board uses this policy and how they interpret it,
Okay.
not mine.
Yep.
Right.
And, you know, frankly, I'm gonna have to make a procedure after this is done for fielding complaints on this policy. It's not a hard thing to do, it's just something we have to do.
So would we have the same kind of level of risk around the, say, the city school, like this, the
Raider.
the Raiders being
Yeah.
associated with the raid and Confederate soldiers?
It could be. Right now, they use a symbol of a penguin, and they use Raider the Penguin, which is a children's book.
Right.
And that was deliberately chosen,
Before
according to
that, it was a
Joan.
pirate, sorry them, they always had a pirate for years and years
Sure.
and years.
Yeah.
So I mean, a pirate could be
Right, but someone could,
construed.
someone can bring it forward, and you have to hear it, and you have to rule on it as a board.
Right.
Okay.
Now, it's my understanding that we have to pass this anyway, this is a state mandate.
That's right.
So are we ready to vote on this? Can I get a yay or a nay or a
Yes.
let's wait or a?
Yep.
Looks like we're ready to vote.
Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna take a roll vote. Those of you in favor of the motion, please speak out. Peter,
Yes?
Ryer,
Yes.
Jack,
Yes.
Susan,
Yes.
Grant,
Yes.
Al,
Yes.
Nilda votes yes. Motion carries. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is also an action item. It's the board moral imperative. It's attachment 7D. I'm going to let Bill intro that for us, and then we'll get a motion on the table.
I took some revisions. I want to thank Ryan and Nilda for working with me a little bit offline between the meetings. And you'll see on the back of it, Maple Run School Board believes that our moral imperative to ensure that all students feel a sense of belonging and safety in our educational community so they can learn and grow throughout their pre-K-12 career and beyond. That there was some, I always appreciate people helping me with wordsmithing. It's not one of my best talents, so thank you to both Ryer and Nilda helping me with that. I'm not going to give a lot of back to it, because we talked about it a bunch at the last meeting, we talked about it at the retreat. On your handout shows the color coding, the theming that was done to get to that. And I'll take any questions if folks have questions on that.
So Bill, just for my clarification, the motion would be to accept this moral imperative.
Right, and I would suggest that if the board so adopted this, that this be on the top of all your agendas. So you know why you're coming here as a group. It's your group statement.
Okay, let's get that motion on the table for continued discussion. I'd like a motion to adopt the moral imperative. Thanks, Al. Is there a second?
Second?
Thank you. Let's continue our discussion. Anyone else have any comments? All right. I'm hearing none, so I think we're ready to move forward on this. So the motion is to adopt the moral imperative as submitted in attachment 7D. The corollary is that this would be on the agendas for future meetings to help guide our process. The motion is on the table. Peter?
Yes.
Ryer?
Yes.
Jack?
Yes.
Susan?
Yes.
Grant?
Yes.
Al?
Yes.
Nilda votes yes, motion carries. Next item on the agenda is the calendar of reports to the board. We have attachment 7E, and this is the first draft of this that Bill has put together, so I'll turn this back over to Bill.
So one of the things I did that's a little different than the work that you saw from the report, the yearly plan that we had last year, was I brought this in, and you'll see there's a new column called topic area that's to align with the moral imperative, and then general work of the board, and you'll see, you might see the word budgets in there, so you'll see the words learning, safety, belonging, since those are the three big areas. And then you might see belonging, you might see budget or advocacy pieces of the board work. And I did leave some empty in April, so we had some room to move. Last year what I found is that we had the plan, and then it happens, I think with most plans, is that you need buffer space to make movement for either something comes up, or we need to change, or we need to move. So I left some time for that as well. I also did a column on the right around policy work, and started some of these. I've got the non-discriminating mascots, which you adopted tonight. There's another mandatory one coming, C14 on 504 and ADA grievance protocol. And then I put the governance policies in there. I gave you out some reports. Some are the same as last year. Some are ones that we had agreed upon, such as the DLO report timing. We can have some discussion tonight. Be glad to take some feedback. One of the things that, as I said earlier, as John and Martha at the end of their presentation, I'm really trying to see the November and December times with information about that will affect budgeting. And so if you look at November 16th, you'll have the DLO report that's scheduled for that time. But we want to give you an overview of grant funding, and then one of the things that we really is going to be part of our budget work is literacy and our work on literacy. You may have, and I will tell you that we'll be bringing a report to you next meeting on that. You may have seen an editorial by Emerson in the Messenger, or there was an article in the Vermont Digger. There's been mentioned in the national press in the past 3 weeks about literacy. So I think it would be good for the board to understand how we're trying to overcome those same challenges here in Maple Run. So,
Thank you. Would you like us to accept this draft, or we're okay with this?
I'm okay with it. I would like you to look at it next time, give me any feedback. If you say, hey, there's something else. But I'm really trying to deliberately align. When I do this in other groups that we plan for, that we say, if these are our main themes, how are we connecting our work to our main themes? So,
Right. Okay, thank you for that. Any questions for Bill? All right, moving on to item F, budget. We have under budget a few things. We have the expenditure targets, which is attachment 7F. We have a public forum discussion, and then we have negotiations. So as far as expenditure targets, is that Martha or Bill or both?
It's both of us. She just pointed to me to start. I can tell when she does that to me. We're taking a play out of the Colchester School District. Amy Miner shared this with me last year, and I thought it was really a smart thing that they do in Colchester, and more districts are doing it. In November, they're working with the board before the administrators go to build their budgets to say, for these major areas, we're gonna set a budgetary expenditure expectation. All this information that's on here, and we will need to have an executive session because some of this are negotiated pieces, not just personnel. There's a busing contract and some other contracts, so we need to talk in an executive session, otherwise you'll prematurely release information you may not want to. But what happens is, by setting these pieces, we can bring you back a budget at that level. And Martha's created a calculator that if we were to keep everything the same structure that we have this year, if we set these percentages, what's it do to the bottom line of the budget? And we'll take a look at that in executive session. You just can't prematurely release that information to your negotiations. And I think we didn't do this last year for staff negotiations, is talk about what do we see as our limit. So I would like that from the board. I set that in the budgetary process. I didn't feel like that was really collaborative, so I think we should do that this year. When we look at all this, you've all heard about inflation, and so the 12-month inflation rate this past September was 8.2%. And so you'll see we've got some of these that have ranges, like health insurance. We've been told that it isn't approved yet, but the V-high rate is at 12.5%. Am I correct?
12.7.
12.7. And so some of these we have dialed in more. But what we'd like the board to do is say, these are the targets you're going after, go build us a budget for it. And I think you need to have that calculator to say, if we set the target at that amount, what's that do to the bottom line? And so in executive session, we have an Excel spreadsheet, or Martha, I won't even say we, it's on my computer. Martha has built it and runs it. An Excel spreadsheet to be able to say what you want to put in for these different areas, especially the TBDs, and what does that do to the bottom line? Because I really just don't want the principals going back and forth and building multiple rounds of the budget. I want them to do it once. And for you to know, okay, if we're setting this percentage rate, if it means cuts, what's it mean coming out? If it doesn't mean cuts, and it means adds, what's that mean to it?
Yeah. Good, thank you. So,
I don't know if that makes sense. I see
go ahead.
I see a quizzical thought looking at me, but maybe it has to be done in executive session.
Well, no, it doesn't need to be executive session, but it would be at least informative maybe to ask at the various levels. I don't know what the kind of logistics around this would be, but we would want the feedback if whatever level we try to set provides the funds required to sort of provide the education we want to provide.
So,
right?
Yeah.
And so that's, and I think that's an approach we took last year, right? We said, what do you guys need in order to get things done the way you want to do it?
Yeah, and we were at a very different inflation rate.
And it was tough, right?
Very different.
But I think that feedback still needs to occur somewhere.
Okay.
And it may just be exactly what you're talking about, where, at this level it's cuts, at this level it's adds.
Right, we can tell you what's,
Yeah.
if we have to cut something to get to that amount, we can tell you what it is.
Yeah.
Or if we have to, or it may require reorganization, and what does that mean? Yeah, and we would tell you that.
Okay.
I want that information to be to the board.
Okay, so just for follow-up, we are going to have an executive session at the end of tonight, just to talk over some of those very specific things related to negotiations, because clearly there's a finding that putting the board would be at substantial risk if this information were made public. All right, moving on. Next item on the agenda is item 8, new business, and that was the governance policies. So Nina was unable to attend the meeting tonight, so she has requested that we table this to the next meeting so she can be present as the chair of this subcommittee to report on this topic. So we're going to do that and move it to the next meeting. Thank you for that. Item 8B is a little bit of housekeeping. So March of 2023 is actually obviously town meeting day. So we're currently scheduled to have a meeting on March 1st and March 15th. Town meeting day is Tuesday, March 7th for 2023. So the question before you is, when we have our board reorganizational meeting, should we move that meeting to Wednesday, March 8th, the day after town meeting, so that everyone's duly elected and in office, or do we just conduct that at the second meeting of March, which would be Tuesday, March 15th, business as usual, and we could either forego the meeting of March 1st or not? What is the pleasure of the board on this? As far as reorganizing the second after the election occurs, if we didn't reorganize, do people that are still in office remain in their positions until they're reorged out, or do we remain in a state of on-board?
No,
Until we,
go ahead out.
everybody stays, until you form a new board.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking. So the question is, do we have an extra meeting? Do we move a meeting to the next day to have the org? Or do we just forego that meeting and have our meeting on the 15th and do our board reorganization on the 15th? Just trying to uncomplicate people's lives. People have a lot going on just for, the town meeting and stuff. Does anyone have a pleasure that they would like to state? So we can get a motion on the board, on the table here. Yes, Ryder?
Yeah, I think it's better to keep it on the 15th. I think having that meeting the day after that election was hard. I can say for me personally, it was like I didn't have everything I needed. I was kind of coming into the meeting blind. So I do think it's nice, especially for Aaron maybe and Bill, to have that time to get the person set up, ready to go. I think a week is a good amount of time to at least prep the person. But that's just my opinion.
That's a good point.
I would
Very good
agree.
point. Anyone have any issues with that?
No, I was just gonna say, I would agree. You don't learn, well, Fairfield's small, so I learned almost immediately, but, if you're working, until 4:30 in the afternoon, trying to get, to the town clerks to get sworn in, trying to figure out it's a short turnaround window.
Agreed. So hearing all that, do we bag the meeting on the 1st?
You might need it for your budgetary hearing.
Okay, so we don't bag it yet. We can bag it closer to the date if we need to.
Yeah, you have to have a hearing within 10 days, and you might just want to use that night
Your informational meeting.
as your.
Oh, yes, very good point. Thank you for that. Okay, do you want a motion to make this change, or is this consensus enough?
It's good enough for me. I just wanted to make sure we asked the question.
Okay, so what we're doing is we're having our org meeting on Tuesday, March 15th. That's the bottom line of this discussion.
Wednesday.
Thank you all.
Wednesday.
Next item is item C, and this is the snowplow bid. And I'm looking for a motion to award the snow removal bid to Gosselin Construction for a 3-year contract pending the bid waiver approval. I think Brianna was going to be here to give this. Is she still?
Yes, I am. Yes, I'm here.
Thank you. Turn it over to you. I don't know if you want to intro this, Martha or Bill.
So I'm Brianne King. I'm the Assistant Business Manager to Martha. And we went out to bid with Gosselin Construction and Small Dog. And with looking over their bid information, it looks like the lower cost would be Goslin. We've had Goslin in the past. So I would ask for a motion to award the 3-year contract for snow removal pending the bid waiver to Goslin Construction.
Okay, do we have that motion, please?
I'll make that motion.
Oh, you moved it.
Do you move it, Al?
I did.
Okay, thank you. Who seconded it?
I did. Susan.
Thank you. All right, any further discussion on the motion to grant the snow removal bid to Goslin Construction? Hearing none, we're going to take the vote. Peter?
Yes?
Ryer?
Yes.
Jack?
Yes?
Susan?
Yes.
Grant?
Yes.
Al?
Yes.
Nilda votes yes. Thank you all. Next item is other business. It's the warrant section. Seeking a motion to approve the warrants, acknowledging that passage of this motion will act as authorization and signature of the individual board members participating remotely. May I have that motion, please?
So moved.
Thanks, Al. Is there a second?
Second?
Thank you. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'm going to go to the vote. Peter?
Yes?
Ryer?
Yes.
Jack?
Yes?
Susan?
Yes.
Grant?
Yes.
Al?
Yes.
Nilda says yes. Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is the superintendent's report.
Thank you, Nilda. I wanted to bring the board up to speed on, it's been talked about a few times at our meetings, but last spring, the state enacted legislation, I think it was Act S-287, which required a different way for counting students than we have in the past. It's a new weighting system for weighting students based on student characteristics and calculating them. This afternoon asked Aaron to put in the resources document on the board's website, a copy of notes that I've been using right now about the weighting system. It looks something like this. Sorry, I don't have it all, have handouts to you, but it is in there. Really about what their goals were to increase educational equity. They had a study done, I want to say, a year and a half ago, looking at the amount of money that it takes to educate students that are in poverty or English as a second language, English language learner, or different grade levels, and if they were in sparsely populated districts or in small schools. That act came about and started looking at, it used to be with equalized pupils, there were multipliers happening, and I don't want to get too much into the math here, but the amount of funding that was happening with equalized pupils didn't represent the actual cost and needs to educate students that have some of these student characteristics. So from that, the state put in a new weighting system. This weighting system is to go into effect in fiscal year 2025, so it's not next year's budget, it's the year after, and it will incrementally step up in quarters of moving from the full equalized student count to full weighted by fiscal year 2029. But it's really to take a viewpoint of what are we matching our resources to respond to the equity needs that exist within the state of Vermont and within our schools. This funding looks at it at a district level. It doesn't look at it at a school level. So it wouldn't look at it at our different schools. It would say what's the combined of all the student population in Maple Rhine. It will change. The modeling right now for us is that we will go down in our proportion of state funding. Even though the state funding might go up, the proportion that we had compared to the rest of the state may go down a little bit. There's some that are going up. There's some that are going up greatly, especially a lot of small schools in high poverty areas, so the Northeast Kingdom. And there's a lot of schools with large populations are actually going to go down in their state funding that they receive. It's been modeled, but we haven't seen anything that's consistent for this year yet. I have a feeling I'm going to be saying that a lot this year, Martha. But I wanted to let you know that this is happening. I put some notes on it for you to know this. Why is this important for you as a school board member? This is important to know that the amount of state funding that we're getting in Maple Run will change. It will change. And we're going to have to respond to that. And so I wish I could give you definite modeling about it, but if you, I gave some notes. If you look over my notes, and they are notes, they're very much in note form. They're not, it's not a narrative, it's actually not, it's enough. I used it to really for educating the leadership team, because we've been starting to have this conversation as a leadership team and how we respond to it. And so, if you look at the notes and you're confused by them or want to talk about it more, I'm more than willing to, but I thought tonight in my superintendent's report, it was good to bring you this information and saying that that's going to start to affect us starting next year's budget building.
Yep, thank you. Any board announcements?
I've just got one, Hilda. I don't know where else to bring this up, but I think it needs to be said, and I'm not sure if, I suspect that a lot of you don't play on the internet. I don't either. So I don't know what's going on, but you hear a lot of stuff. And politics has come into our schools, and I think we need to be aware of it. And I know that board members that have families running, and obviously everyone has a right to support the person that they think will do the best job, but it's actually been into our schools, and there is no law against candidates visiting the schools, but then we have to provide equal opportunity for anybody that wants to show up into the schools. And I think the idea might be wait till after the election and then we can do something about it, and I think it would be wise to do something about it now and say it's not allowed. Our schools are there for a particular reason, and it's not to garner votes, it's not to win people to your side, it is to educate the children. And I think when we talk to teachers, we're taking their mind off what they're supposed to be doing. Listening to John, I think they have plenty to do without being politicized. And I would just like to see the superintendent, that'd be your job, Bill, to just say, okay, that's enough, it's not going to happen. And if we don't have a board policy, then I think we need to get one about how much we're going to let the business of politics come into our schools with people in there.
I disagree with you, but let me give you a few examples.
Sure.
Yeah, Al, excuse me, Al. Let's just let Peter finish up and then you can comment.
No, I'd like to hear Al, thank you. Thanks, Milton.
All right. Go ahead, Al.
Well, young people for a long time have not been allowed to go into the political dynasties because all they were doing was dropping off leaflets. And that's changed completely, because when they reduced the age to 18, it opened up the door and gave them an opportunity to expound. In the various classes in high, for instance, community service, civics, marketing, it's all part of the activities. And these students are informed. And being informed is learning. Because we're not teaching just strictly what's in a book, but we're growing that student both educationally, socially, and being a good citizen. So I tend to disagree with that.
I'm not going to disagree with you, Mr. Corey. I'm simply going to say, for high school, you're absolutely right. For grade school, you're absolutely wrong.
Well, I appreciate the comment, and just for me going on the record, some of this stuff we have been aware of and have dealt with behind the scenes too. So just because it didn't become a matter of public information doesn't mean it hasn't been addressed in one way, shape, or form. But thank you for that, Peter. Any other board announcements?
I just got a quick
Right.
question. Were the candidates
Right.
just walking into
Jack,
the school, or were
Jack.
they invited?
I don't
Go
know.
ahead.
Was it?
Jack, I apologize, I keep interrupting you.
During
Please
school.
go ahead.
Oh, no, it wasn't the forum that I think Team USA pulls every year. It wasn't that. This was a candidate during the day in the building passing out pamphlets. It wasn't the forum.
Okay.
All right, so.
I agree with you.
We understand that issue. Laura, you have another matter?
Yeah, so two things. One, I wanted to give an update about Walking Wednesdays, which was every Wednesday in October. There was a total of 314 students who participated, which equaled out to about 79 students per. And today we had one, and it was 134 students and 21 adults. So I just want to give a lot of credit to Mitch and his team over there at City School, because they're doing a great job. Walking Wednesdays is like my favorite thing. I love doing it. Me and Lauren do it every time, so it's great. The second thing is a student reached out to me about a month ago and was interested in me writing a letter of recommendation for them for the Vermont Youth Council that's organized by the governor, by Governor Scott. And I wrote a letter for them, and I just heard out a couple hours ago back from them that they were accepted. So they're one of 28 students who are a member of the Vermont Youth Council, and they're a student at BFA. So that's like super awesome. And just congratulate, I won't release his name, but just congratulations to this person. And it's once again a testament to the work that BFA is doing, that we have a student leader like that representing us at the state. So
Thanks, Ryan. Anyone else related to board announcements? Okay, hearing none, we have our list of agenda items for future meetings, and I think we're going to knock a couple of them off at the next meeting. We do have a need to go into executive session for the topic of negotiations, because discussing negotiations during a full board meeting would put the board at a significant disadvantage. So therefore, I need a motion to go into executive session, please. And who do we want in there? Martha and Bill, is that correct?
Yep, those are the two of us.
I'll
Thank
make
you.
that motion.
So can I have that motion, please?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you. And we'll take a vote on that motion. Peter?
Yes.
Ryer?
yes.
Jack?
Yes.
Susan?
Yes.
Grant?
Yes.
Al?
Yes.
Hilda votes yes. We're in executive session in a couple minutes.